This is another archival upload of some of my previous mix critique videos. I apologize for the vertical format that this video is about to switch to. This is 166 to 170. This was sent in by Benji. Right away, the tones aren't bad, but everything is not gelling together. It sounds like a bunch of separate instruments. Like, you're clearly not using any mix bus compression on this mix at all. Guitars are way too loud compared to everything else. The drums are disappearing into the background. Like, the drums need to punch through. Like, you don't want them overpowering, obviously, but they need to be present in the mix. Your EQ doesn't sound that bad. The source tones sound okay. It's just, it's not gelling together. The levels aren't right. The compression's not right. Okay, there are actually vocals in the track. I honestly kind of wasn't expecting vocals at all. You got way too much reverb going on in the chorus here. All right, man, straight up, the song itself is kind of boring. Like, especially just the intro, the fact that we got 53 seconds into the song before vocals started at all. Like, I was genuinely surprised that the vocals came in at all. I thought you had just sent me an instrumental work in progress, like you were waiting to do the vocals. The fact that there was that much before the vocals came in and it wasn't interesting enough to just be an instrumental part, that's a problem. As far as the mix goes, the EQ on everything is okay. The source tones sound like they're pretty good. The biggest problem is your overall levels. You got to work on your fader balance. Like, things are not sitting where they need to in relation to each other, and you are lacking on compression big time. Like, you need a lot more compression to make everything gel together. The song was sent in by Will. All right, the guitar tone sounds great. The bass tone is kind of garbage. It's really muddy. Like, you can't really hear any definition in the bass. Drums, I'm pretty sure aren't real, but they don't sound great. Like, they just don't sound really together like an actual kit. Again, it's probably programmed drums, so you kind of have to deal with what you have with the sound, but like, they just sound a little too separate. Overall, the guitars and the bass are probably too loud. The cymbals are definitely too loud compared to the rest of the drums. Like, the kick and the snare are not cutting through the mix at all. And that's kind of, you know, the important part for the driving of the whole feel of the song is the kick and the snare. And that part with that extra lead in the background, it just sounds, everything sounds super muddy. There's no definition between the instruments at all. Yeah, man, just pretty much you gotta work on your EQ. Everything is masking each other. Like, there's no definition between all the different instruments. Like, it's super muddy. Can't hear anything clearly except for the guitar over the top. The drums sound a little too separate. Like, I would compress those more so they sound a little more like a real kit. But overall, yeah, you gotta carve some of those like low mids out of a lot of things. This was sent in by Omar. The bass tone sounds great. Don't think there's any guitar yet. For the drums, like, the drums sound really, really weak. First of all, you can't hear the kick at all. Like, you can mostly just hear the snare, and then when the cymbals come in, you can hear the cymbals too. But the snare sounds like it wasn't being hit nearly hard enough. It sounds like the drummer had very little energy. And again, we can't hear the kick at all, and that's gonna add a lot of energy to the whole track, so that's a problem. Cymbals are also way too loud. They're masking the vocals. That's an issue. Bring the cymbals down a bit. Honestly, the high-end attack of the bass is also fighting with the vocals. You gotta find a way to make those vocals actually cut through everything else. You definitely have things boosted too much in like the 2 to 5K range. It's making everything else sound really thin by comparison. You need to realize that EQ, just like everything else, is a balancing act. If you push those high mids too much, it's gonna feel like the low end is lacking by comparison, and that's gonna make everything seem really, really thin, even though it shouldn't be if you just back down those high mids a bit. It also sounds like you're being way too shy with your compression on everything. Like, the drums don't sound very compressed at all. The vocals don't really sound too compressed. Don't be afraid to use compression. This was sent in by Jonathan. Fell into this hole. Alright, so I like the guitar sound a lot. The vocals and the drums kind of sound like they were recorded in a shitty room. It sounds like you're not compressing anything like at all. Yeah, especially the vocals have like zero compression on them and they just sound weak as a result. They're also really not cutting through the mix the way they should. You also need a lot more low end in the kick, especially like you gotta bump up like below 100 hertz somewhere in the kick. Yeah, that main rhythm guitar is high-passed way too far. The low mids is what gives you the energy in a song. So when you're cutting that out of both the guitar and the bass, like those are generally the instruments that really fill out the low mids. So if you're cutting too much of the low mids in both of those, it just feels empty as a result. The drums sound reasonably compressed for the genre, but literally everything else doesn't sound compressed enough. Yeah, man, so overall, add some more low end in the kick. Don't cut so much low mids out of the bass and especially out of the guitars. The vocals sound a little too roomy. They just sound like they were recorded in a really untreated room. It doesn't sound great. And just overall, you need to use compression a lot more. Don't be shy around compression. Sometimes compressing the shit out of something is exactly what it needs. This was sent in by Mike. The snare actually sounds compressed enough, but the rest of the drums don't. Cymbals are pretty washy. They're way too far over the top. The kick is definitely not compressed enough, and you got some really nasty boxy frequencies in the kick. You got to dip some of those out. We also need a lot more of the high-end attack out of the kick. Right now, it sounds like you were going for kind of a heartbeat sound, which can be cool as an effect over part of a song, but you don't want your kick to sound like that for the whole song. You still need that high-end attack energy to really make the song move. You weirdly have like a huge hole at 1K, and that's where most things are gonna cut through. So like your vocals, your guitars, like even the bass to some extent. The 1K area is a really good area for things to cut through. So I'm not sure why you cut so much out of it, but yeah, there's just a massive hole around 1K, which... Yeah, the drums in general are poking out way too far over the top of everything. Honestly, I would almost say that this was probably mixed by the drummer because the drums are so loud. But yeah, those need to be brought down. You also need some more mix bus compression. That'll help them sit a little bit better amongst everything else. Honestly, it's mostly a levels thing, and you're not compressing on the mix bus enough, I don't think. I think that would help the drums sit better a lot more overall.